Hello and welcome to healthyhouseplants.com, where we teach you all about gardening in the great indoors. If you'd like to support our show, please use our Amazon affiliate link below. Today I am going to do a revival video suggested by one of my subscribers, Christina H. Thank you, Christina H., for this great idea. It just so turns out that she asked me to do a revival video on Hoya, carnosa, and the corkscrew or rope, also called rope, Hoya. And just so happens that someone had given me one that looked pretty bad to revive. So we are going to see if we can revive this guy. I did prune off a lot of the dead stuff. So it's cleaned up in terms of that. When you do a revival, you do want to take off dead things, stuff like that, dead material, obviously dead leaves, dead branches, etc. Just make sure they're dead before you do that. You can rub the scissors or the pruning shears against the vine, and if there's green underneath, it's still alive. If it's all brown through, breaks off easily, it is dead. So do get rid of the dead stuff, but remember that when you prune plants, that also stresses them. This plant is already stressed enough, so I don't need to be cutting it all the way back before I go ahead and try to revive it and make the situation even worse. You always want to water plants before you go and repot them, as I mentioned in my repotting series. So this one was watered prior. I did water it yesterday, watered it a little bit more this morning because I suspect with this plant that the reason it is doing so poorly is that it has been in this pot way too long and it is not getting enough water. You may find when you go to revive a plant that the roots are mushy and they are not very many roots and they may be black and that sort of thing. In that case, we are dealing then with root rot, and I have a whole playlist on root rot. So consult that if you find that the roots look compromised. Here, I think we're going to find a lot of root, and I think we are going to find very little soil, and that will explain why this plant is in desperate need of a repotting and needs more soil. I do have two pot sizes here. So this is a hanging planter. I took off the hanger part here prior so I could work with it. You want to do that before you try to repot. Oops, now we're going to have another series on rooting these guys in water, so that will be perfect for that. So we did a little pruning, not on purpose. Now this is the same size pot as this one. One thing about plants that have been in the same size pot for a really long time is a lot of times they're going to have a lot of salt buildup in them, especially if they are plastic. They've absorbed it, so I would just get rid of the pot. If it's a beautiful pot, a clay, ceramic pot, you love it, then just clean it really well and it'll be okay. You could reuse it or use it for another plant. In this case, a lot of times when I'm reviving a plant, I will go down a pot size smaller even, or the same size, but that's usually when the plant has root rot problems. I'm guessing with this plant the fact is that it just doesn't have enough soil in it and it's got a lot of roots. In that case, we're going to need to go a little bit bigger. We're not going to want to go a lot bigger, as I always talk about, because then we're going to end up with a lake in there, and then we will end up with root rot after we started with not too much roots in there, and then we will end up with not enough. So this size is probably going to be a really good size. It's going to give a little more soil, and once it starts growing new roots into that soil, it's going to get nice and healthy, and then at that point I can see if it gets tight in here, I can put it into a bigger pot, but we're going to start from here. So I'm going to take it out of here first, and we're going to examine the roots. Sometimes they get stuck in here. I have a video on how to get them out. I think this one's going to come out fairly easily. Also, when you water, that also will help. Okay, so looking at it, you can see I'm breaking up the roots here as I go, but you can see there's a lot of roots in this guy, right? So this is the fact is it's just mostly roots, not very much soil for it to work with. So by putting it into some soil, I think we're going to save this in time and get it to revive cleaning it up a little bit more as I go. Okay, so setting it down. I'm going to put some soil in the bottom of this guy. I have some drywall tape that I like to use to cover up holes so that the soil doesn't leak out. We already have, this guy doesn't have enough soil. We don't need to lose any more. Putting about at the bottom, about an inch of soil, maybe an inch and a half. We want, when the plant settles in, to be a ½ inch to a ¼ inch below the rim of the pot. That way when you water, the water doesn't come rushing out, but you don't want it to be too deep because then it gets very moist in there and you end up with pests and diseases and root rot, which is a disease. Okay, so it's a little too low still, so I'm going to put a little more soil in there. Now, say I got this pot and I find myself filling it up with tremendous amounts of soil before I can repot this plant. That's not a good sign. That means you've got way too big of a pot. Because besides, I talk about the 2/3 plant to 1/3 pot ratio, you also want 2/3 root mass to 1/3 soil ratio in the pot itself. Okay, so now I've got it here. Now this isn't a hanging basket one. I didn't want to go the next size up hanging basket. It would have been too big, so I'm going to have to set this up on top of something so that it can drape down for a while until it can be potted up the next time into a hanging basket. But Hoyas also do well from hanging from tall pieces of furniture, etc. Okay, it feels and looks like it's got a really good level in there. So now I'm going to start filling it in. You want to go around evenly because what I want to do here, and this is Promix BX soil, by the way. I have added some micronutrients via worm compost. And I did add some extra pumice because Hoya do like really, really quick drainage. Not this quick the way it was, but quick drainage. I have a video on their care, link below. Okay, so now you want to work your way around, okay? Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get those roots that are basically become inactive, and all the plant's really doing is drinking what it can from what little it can absorb of water just to survive. We want those roots that we did break up a tad on the sides and on the bottom to engage and begin growing healthy roots now that they've got the nutritive soil and moisture. The soil itself, you do not want to add fertilizer when you're reviving a plant. That is too much for the plant. The plant has to convert fertilizer into something it can use. You do not want the plant trying to convert. You want the plant working on reviving itself by making strong roots and beginning new growth. The worm compost is a very low nutrient type of amendment, and it also will help the plant fight off any diseases. Worm compost has a lot of really cool characteristics, and I will include some videos that I've done on that too. Okay, so working our way around, you can see that even though this isn't a lot bigger pot, I'm adding quite a bit of soil. I don't want any dry air pockets around the side of the plant at all, because then we are going to be dealing with what we were dealing with when the plant was basically without soil, and a lot of air was getting in there because there's very little soil for the roots to adhere to and grow in. So this will be perfect for this guy. It's going to take some time when you have a plant that is very, very compromised, like this plant was and still is. It takes a little bit of time for it to revive. So you need to give it some patience. You need to be patient. You need to give it some time. But in time, it will start to grow new growth. At that point, when it starts to grow some new growth, you can think about taking off some of the old growth that doesn't look all that great. But don't go crazy when you see a little green. As mentioned, I want to get it in there, make sure I get it all the way around, and then push on the sides. You're not really doing any pushing on the roots at this point around the sides because there are no roots there yet. You're just trying to make sure you don't have air pockets. Anywhere that seems a little lower than the other, make sure to fill it in so it's all even all the way through and all the way around, because what will happen if you don't do that is when you water, all the water will pool in the low area and then the roots won't get moisture because water will run downhill. It always does. And then you're going to have a problem with only partial root growth, which is what we are trying to fix here. Okay. All right, now after you've repotted a plant, you always want to water very thoroughly, very well, and then you don't want to water again until it's starting to approach dryness. So I'm going to need to see the soil has dried out some before I water this again. I'm going to water now. You want to really soak the soil after repotting, especially a plant that has been dying of thirst for a long time, literally dying of thirst. It's good to do it until you see water coming out the drainage hole. So it's going to be pretty heavy. That's another sign for you too later on. Feel how heavy it is now. Okay, it's starting to come out the drainage holes. There it goes. Feel how heavy it is now, and then maybe a week from now when I go to check it to see if it needs watering, if it's half as much weight, I'll know that it's time. After, you'll know a plant is reviving, is getting better when you start to see new growth. A lot of times you will see new growth coming from the plant, from the center of the plant, from the crown of the plant, from the base of the plant, in this case, the base of this plant. So that is a good sign. Also some greening up. So the existing leaves that are on here are alive. They will start to green up as they get some nutrients from the new soil. So that will be another indicator that I'm on the right track and she is doing better. A good thing to do when you're doing a revival is to put in a plant stake, put when the date of the revival started. You can continue to add to it as you continue to fertilize, things like that. So you have a good record of what you did to a plant to get it to be a lot better. You can also do this in a notebook too. I tend to do it a lot on these because I'll be checking plants and I'm like, oh, that's right, I did a revival, and oh, and I put on here that the kind of soil that I used, and then I added worm castings and pumice as well. So it gives me a really good history on the plant. This right here was a little bit hanging there, so I'm going to check that. You really don't want dead ends hanging. Yeah, so that's not really alive. So I'm going to prune it back right to above the last leaf, and that is going to stimulate new growth there because the growth hormones for the leaf are right there. So when I see a little green leaf peeking out of there, I will be rejoicing. That will be telling me that the plant is saying, I'm going to stay around after all. You can see even when you do this, the plant already looks better. Just knowing that you've got it in some nice soil, that it's got some good moisture, and that it has a chance at life rather than just dwindling away and ending up in the trash bin, unfortunately, or the compost pile. Okay, so here we go with this beauty. Here is a growth tip there that I'm going to leave, but I am going to prune off right here at that. So another growth tip there. You can see we will check in with her in the future, hopefully to see her looking even better, much better than she already does. Thank you for stopping by today. Please leave any comments about any indoor gardening tutorials you'd like to see. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And please check the bell if you'd like to be notified when new videos are released.